If I were to ask you now, what's the most important thing to you in life? No matter what anyone comes up with, it comes down to a very basic stance, and that is lifestyle. We all want to maintain a particular type of lifestyle. Some of us it's very expensive, some of it's more simple, but whatever it is, we have our own style in mind. And however we work that out, underlying it, we need the finances to keep going there. We need to have some money coming in so that we can maintain that lifestyle. I was recently talking to some lawyers, and I said to them, how is it for you in your work at the moment? And they said, I feel like a hamster on a wheel. I feel like I have to keep running to keep going. I have a lifestyle which involves my house, it involves my children in school, it involves horses, it involves all sorts of things that we love to do, or travel. So I said to him, well, what would happen if this came to a halt, if suddenly you could not continue in that lifestyle? And they said, but we'll be totally lost, but that's not going to happen. And yet about 10 years ago, when it came to the great crash, a lot of people suddenly found that the income they felt they were going to get is not what actually happened. What would happen to you if after 3 months you still hadn't the cash coming in? If after 6 months, if that went on for a year, either because of the economy or because of your health or the health in your family, how would you survive that? My name is Rodney Peyton. I'm a consultant surgeon, I'm an entrepreneur and an investor, and I'm also a wealth strategist. I am not a financial advisor, but I help a lot of people, along with my friends who are financial advisors, to come to a passive income stream where they can maintain their lifestyle no matter what happens. There are two levels of this. The first is called financial independence. That is when you can maintain your present lifestyle whatever happens. You can pay your expenses, but you can't have any more than that. You can't have the extra holidays. You can't have the wild parties. You can't have the boat. You can't do anything more than just maintain your lifestyle. That's financial independence. Financial freedom is what we all aim towards. That is when you don't care what happens to the economy, because whatever happens, you're insulated against it. And having given this talk around the world and talked to literally thousands of people, what we have developed now is found the 5 absolute basic fundamental wealth strategies that help to grow, develop and maintain the passive income you require for financial freedom. It's contained in one phrase. It's multiple streams of cash protected by active review. Multiple streams of cash protected by active review. And what I'm going to do in the next few moments is just to go over each one of those and give you a taste of the sort of things we talk about under each heading. So let's start with multiple streams of income. What are a few things that belong in this category? For most people and most wealthy, it's about real estate. Real estate, some people say, well, my home is an investment. Your home is not an investment. Your home is something you have to pay for all the time. And if you stop working, the mortgage still has to be paid. So real estate, when one thinks about it, there are 2 types. There are real estate which actually produce income producing stuff like rental income from commercial properties, rental income from family housing. There's also, unfortunately, speculative real estate. I was recently on stage with a well-known personality, and she said, well, I'm all right as far as real estate's concerned because I have 3 big properties. I have one in the Hamptons, I have one in Florida, and I have one in LA. And I bought them for $2.5 million, roughly. They're now worth perhaps $3.5 million. So if I had to sell them, I would have that cash coming in. And we had to say, well, look, if you have to sell, that means that you are a motivated seller. Motivated sellers do not get their price, and then the real estate agent gets their price, and there are all sorts of expenses. So what you think this is going to produce isn't necessarily going to do so. That is speculation, same as buying off plan and reselling it. On the other hand, owning houses which produce rent, low to middle income housing which produces rent no matter what happens, that produces a cash flow. There are other methods of dealing in real estate. There's paper dealing with what we call a REIT, real estate investment trusts. You can invest in those trusts where other people own the real estate. Obviously in paper there are shares, and in my own case, for instance, there are royalties. If you write a book, then over a period of time you're still entitled to royalties. For instance, from my point of view, if a university uses part of my books, I get paid every year. I get a check that says thank you so much for allowing us to read your book and to use it. The other stream of income could be investing in someone else's business, and those can be things like we've invested in movies, where we don't invest in the movie itself, but we actually invest in bridging loans. Because when a movie is started, there's a period of time when the house is looking for cash to carry them through. So instead of investing in something which may or may not give a return, you invest in something which has a fixed return of maybe 0.5% to 1% a week. Those are all types of multiple streams of income. The second thing you've got to really think about is cash. Cash is king. We have already talked about rental income. A lot of people think they've developed multiple streams. Well, I can be getting cash from this, I can be getting money from that. But actually their streams are full of rocks. They're not full of the water, the flow of the money coming through. Cash is king. And for this, you've got to know your numbers. You've got to have bookkeeping. You've got to know how much is coming in. You've got to know what your expenses are and what profit you're actually making before tax on this property. So you've got to be very careful about your numbers. Good bookkeeping. Others will say to me, well, look, pension, that's cash coming in, isn't it? I said, well, yeah, but pension's only going to come in at a late stage in your life, if you make it that far. And of course, pension rules can change. You get older, inflation takes account, and you suddenly don't have the money you think is going to come in. So pensions aren't necessarily the safest place to have your money. They are good for the long term, but not in the short term, which is what you want, to get that financial freedom as early as possible. Having set all this up, then you've actually got to protect it. There are a lot of vultures out there who would like to take your money off you. Three things we'd point out just to begin with in this category were tax. You've got to watch the taxation laws. We all have to pay tax, that is reasonable, but we don't have to pay overtax. You need to have tax mitigation strategies, and that's why you use financial advisors to help you through that. Insurances. One of the biggest causes of loss in wealth in middle-income Americans is actually road traffic accidents. One is they can't work anymore, but also if they have accidents and someone else is hurt, then someone else can come at them personally, and they can lose their house. They can lose whatever they've built up because they haven't the insurance to cover it. So you need insurances. Sometimes we would talk about term life insurance, where at the beginning of your married life, for instance, with a family, you need a lot of money if anything goes wrong. Well, that tails off over time. And at the end of time, maybe you need life-based insurance. So there are different types of insurance for different things that are going on in your life. And then legal entities. I've already pointed out that if somebody comes against you, they can take your house, they can take your assets. So you've got to have them in legal entities. Again, people say, well, I have a corporation, I have a company, I pay every year my annual fees to this. But lawyers can go through, do you actually keep proper books? Do you keep proper accounts? Do you keep corporate minutes? Do you have annual general meetings? Because if you don't, you actually don't have a corporation. So you've got to be clear about what you mean when you have legal entities. Multiple streams of cash protected. The next thing is active. You have got to be actively involved. What we're talking about, a lot of people would term passive income. And there is a passivity about it. You can be asleep at night, the rents will still come in. But you've still got to be actively involved. You've got to have the governance, both of yourself and what's happening, and of any agents you've got. We've had agents that have sent us bills that have been the wrong bills. One in particular billed us for 4 air conditioning units. And then we found that he disappeared, and we ended up still with the cost of those air conditioning units because he'd taken the money with him. And then we talked about bookkeeping early on. You also need proper accountancy and accountants. Those are people who not just keep your books, but can keep you advised of what is happening with your books, can look at it at 3 months, at 6 months down the road, and tell you whether your strategies are right for the moment, or whether you need to do something to mitigate tax, whether you need to do something in corporate entities to sort yourselves out. So proper accountancy is required over and above just bookkeeping. And finally, you have to review what's going on. You cannot just assume that when you set up a strategy that it will continue on for the rest of your days. Regulations change, and in particular tax regulations change. If you've offshore companies or even onshore companies, the tax authorities can change what is happening, and it can make your strategy stupid. It can make it you're actually spending money on the strategy if you do not change. A second thing will happen is we all get older. What you want to do early on in terms of risk is not the same as you want to do at the age of 60, 65, 70. You want income coming in, and you don't want so much risk. So your strategy has to change over time. And finally, there's legacy. What do you want to leave behind? To whom do you want to pass this on? What do you want to be remembered by? So those are all examples of how you've got to be actively involved and how you've got to change things depending on context. So in summary, what I've done in this brief talk is talk to you about the 5 absolute fundamentals of a wealth strategy. That is multiple streams of income which actually produce cash, because cash is king. You've got to protect them. You've got to actively review them. So you've got to be involved, and you've got to make sure that strategy is up to date. So thank you for listening, and please contact us in numbers you can see at the end of this. Thank you.